Sometimes you find yourself in a workplace where the real entertainment has nothing to do with the job itself, and everything to do with the people you're stuck with. When I first started working at this place, I quickly realized that organized wasn't exactly in their vocabulary. The office was in rural North Carolina, which, coming from New York, already felt like moving to a parallel universe. People were polite in a way that was almost suspicious to me, like they'd say, "Bless your heart," with a smile that made you wonder if they were secretly cursing you out. The building was a big converted farmhouse with a break room that looked like it had once been someone's kitchen. There was a full fridge and freezer, a stove, even an oven. You'd think with all that space they'd have some kind of system for whose food was whose. Nope. Nobody labeled anything. Nobody posted a sign saying, "Hey, don't steal people's lunch." Apparently, it was a free-for-all. Some things were communal, some things were personal, and no one could ever be completely sure which was which. I decided early on I wasn't going to play guessing games with my meals. So I always brought my lunch in a little floral lunch bag and kept it zipped up in the fridge. I thought that would be enough to deter confusion. I was wrong. From day one, it was obvious that people in that office had a complicated relationship with food. I'd see folks bringing in entire crockpots of soup or giant foil pans of baked spaghetti. Someone would announce, "It's up for grabs," and within minutes, half the building would show up with plastic plates, like they were rationing for a storm. But there was this unspoken rule, one that apparently nobody ever actually spoke about out loud. If it's not labeled and you think you can get away with it, you can just help yourself. I learned later that this had been a problem for a while. Food theft wasn't rare, it was almost a tradition. People had stories about finding half their leftovers missing, or their sodas mysteriously disappearing from the back of the fridge. But no one ever confronted each other about it. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining things when I'd see containers that looked suspiciously empty by the end of the day. But then I started to notice the little side glances, the subtle sighs when someone opened the fridge and found their meal gone. Nobody said a word. Coming from New York, where if someone took your food you'd absolutely call them out, this silence baffled me. I asked one coworker, "Does nobody care their lunch is missing?" She just shrugged and said, "Oh, bless your heart. That's just how it is around here." I never got used to that, so I made a habit of keeping my meals sealed up tight in my floral bag. It was my one small attempt at defending my lunch from the free-range scavengers. Then came the day I brought in my chori-pollo. I'd made it the night before, chicken, chorizo, peppers, onions, and the kind of spicy sauce that makes your eyes water. It was exactly the kind of food I loved. Bold, unapologetic, hot enough to clear your sinuses. I knew most people in the office thought black pepper was adventurous, so I never offered to share. When I set it in the fridge that morning, tucked inside my unmistakable little lunch bag, I didn't think twice. Because surely, even the office food thief would see that bag, smell that spice, and decide it wasn't worth the risk. Apparently, I overestimated both their restraint and their taste buds. The truth is, there was never a grand plan to catch a thief. I didn't wake up that morning thinking, "Today is the day I expose whoever's been stealing lunches." But sometimes, the universe decides to set up the perfect little moment of poetic justice all on its own. I remember standing in the kitchen the night before, tasting the sauce I'd made, and thinking it was almost too spicy. Almost. I'd added extra chiles, a generous heap of cayenne, and a dash of something I'd picked up at a little Mexican grocery back home in New York. When I first moved down south, I learned quickly that my idea of spicy wasn't shared by most people around me. Down here, folks like things sweeter, milder. There was a running joke that anything spicier than a bell pepper was too much heat, so I'd learned to tone it down when I cooked for potlucks or shared meals. But this chori-pollo, this was just for me. It was the taste of where I came from, fiery and bold, exactly how I liked it. When I packed it in my floral lunch bag that morning, the thought did cross my mind. If someone tries to steal this, they're in for a surprise. But even then, I didn't expect anyone to be that bold. After all, who sees a sealed lunch bag that isn't theirs and thinks, "Sure, I'll take my chances." Still, there was a tiny part of me that couldn't help feeling a little satisfied at the idea. Because the thing about being the quiet one, about being the short, unassuming woman no one expects to make a fuss, is that people assume you're easy to walk over. And if someone was going to steal my lunch, maybe, just maybe, they deserved to find out exactly what they were messing with. So I zipped the bag shut, put it in the fridge, and went about my morning.
No cameras. No traps. No acquiesctions.
Just one container of nuclear-level chori-pollo, waiting patiently for its unsuspecting victim. The funny thing is, there wasn't any elaborate setup. I didn't leave a note in the bag that said, "Touch this and regret it." I didn't even think about how the morning would end. I just went about my day as usual. I arrived at the office, greeted a few people, put my floral lunch bag in the fridge, and walked away. I spent the next few hours working, occasionally glancing at the clock and thinking about how satisfying lunch was going to be. Around mid-morning, I remember catching sight of Brent in the hallway. He was holding a cup of coffee, talking too loudly about something he'd fixed over the weekend. Brent. He was the kind of man who never hesitated to tell you how much he could bench press or how he wasn't afraid of a little heat. He'd brag about the time he put extra hot sauce on his wings and barely even flinched. He liked to think of himself as the resident tough guy, 6 feet tall, broad shoulders, and the volume of a man who assumed everyone wanted to hear his opinion. I didn't pay much attention. I just thought, it figures he's the loudest person here too. When lunchtime rolled around, I took my time heading to the break room. I didn't want to have to make small talk, so I waited until the crowd had thinned. I pushed open the door expecting a quiet, normal scene, maybe a few people microwaving leftovers. Instead, I stepped into something that looked like a cross between a medical emergency and a soap opera. There were at least 5 people crowded around one of the chairs. The HR lady was holding a blood pressure cuff. And right in the middle of it all was Brent. Red-faced, sweating, eyes watering, clutching a paper towel like it was the only thing keeping him alive. I froze in the doorway, genuinely concerned. "Is he okay?" I asked. That's when Brent looked up, locked eyes with me, and started yelling. The moment Brent opened his mouth, I realized this was about to become the most unintentionally hilarious moment of my entire time at that job. He pointed at me with a trembling finger and practically shouted, You tried to poison me." I blinked. "Excuse me?" I asked, genuinely confused. He kept going, voice cracking with outrage. "That food. IT was yours, wasn't IT? You put something in IT. IT burned my mouth, my throat. It's not safe." Everyone went dead silent. The HR lady stopped mid-pump on the blood pressure cuff. One of the other employees awkwardly stepped back, as if unsure whether to keep watching or quietly leave. I looked at Brent. His face flushed bright red, eyes watering, sweat dripping down his temple, and it finally clicked. He'd eaten my chori-pollo. He'd gone into the fridge, unzipped my floral lunch bag, and helped himself to something he clearly thought was up for grabs. And now he was acting like I was the villain in this story. I felt my mouth twitch, trying not to smile. "I don't understand," I said carefully. "You ate my lunch?" He looked offended that I dared to state the obvious. "It was in the fridge," he barked. "How was I supposed to know it was yours?" I glanced at the bag. "It was in my lunch bag," I said calmly. "I always keep my food in there, so no one confuses it with the communal stuff." Brent's face got even redder, which I honestly didn't think was possible. "It doesn't matter," he snapped. "Nobody labels anything here. It's not safe to leave something that hot where someone could get to it." That's when I heard a little snort behind me. I turned to see Carol from accounting, trying very hard not to laugh. The HR lady cleared her throat. "Brent, did you take something from the fridge without asking?" He sputtered, looking around for backup. "I thought it was extra," he muttered, voice smaller now. "I didn't know. Couldn't help it." I raised an eyebrow and said, "So, let me get this straight. You helped yourself to someone else's lunch, didn't like that it was spicy, and now you're accusing me of trying to poison you?" The room went so quiet you could hear the microwave humming. Someone in the back coughed. Brent looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. His voice dropped to a defensive mutter. "Well, people should label things." I didn't say another word. I didn't have to. Everyone had seen exactly what happened. And judging by the looks being exchanged, Brent's reputation as the big, macho tough guy had taken a permanent hit. After that day, things were never quite the same in the break room. Word got around fast. Faster than I could have imagined. By the end of the week, everyone in the building knew that Brent, the guy who bragged about eating the spiciest wings in the county, had been nearly undone by a 5-foot woman's lunch. And more importantly, everyone knew he'd been caught red-handed stealing it. It was almost surreal to watch how quickly the dynamic shifted. Before, Brent was the loudest voice in the room, always talking over people, always acting like he was in charge of whatever conversation he'd inserted himself into. After the incident, as people started calling it, he got a lot quieter. He still tried to act unbothered, like he hadn't practically accused me of attempted murder over some chiles, but nobody was buying it. Anytime he started telling one of his stories about how tough he was, someone would cough under their breath, chori-pollo, and everyone within earshot would crack up. It became this running joke that never completely went away. I didn't mind. In fact, I was kind of proud of it. Because the truth was, I hadn't set out to catch him or humiliate him. I just made my lunch the way I always did, tucked it in my bag, and expected people to respect that it wasn't theirs to take. It shouldn't have been such a radical concept. But somehow it was. And in the end, I think that's what made it so satisfying. I didn't have to yell. I didn't have to confront him with anger or threats. All I did was keep doing exactly what I'd been doing, taking up the space I was entitled to quietly, confidently, without apology. He was the one who overstepped. He was the one who exposed himself literally and figuratively as the problem. And when he tried to turn it around on me, everyone could see the absurdity for themselves. After that, no one ever touched my lunch again. People started labeling their containers. The fridge even got a polite little sign taped to the door. If it's not yours, don't eat it. Simple, obvious, and apparently necessary. Looking back, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't about plotting or scheming. It's about standing your ground and letting people show the truth of who they are. Brent's reaction said everything. And the fact that he never apologized, that said even more. But in the end, I didn't need his apology. Because every time I opened that fridge after, I knew nobody was going to mess with my lunch again. And if they did, well, they'd better be ready to handle the heat.